Hi, and welcome to another episode of Flippin' Rich with Peter Vexelman. Hey, Peter, how you doing today?
Good. How you doing, Julie?
Good, good. So today we're going to be talking about how to convert your leads into deals. And I think it's important because to talk about, people will say, oh, it's a lead. Mm-hmm. But there's many different types of lead sources, and not all leads are the same. I mean, wouldn't you agree?
Not all leads are created equal.
No.
Absolutely.
So a lot of us are seeing things. Okay, get real estate leads for your investing business. First, let's talk about what we call a raw lead. What would you consider like a raw lead?
Well, a raw lead is probably exactly what it sounds like. A raw lead is probably as cold of a lead as you're going to get. Mm-hmm. And, there's different ways of getting raw leads. Number one, you could literally cold call, and I know we're probably going to get into all this. But the raw lead is somebody you initiated contact with that probably doesn't even know you exist. Mm-hmm. You're trying to time that lead perfectly, right? It's like you're trying to time it at the time you're contacted them to the time that they want to sell it. Mm-hmm. They made no outreach to you. They may not even be thinking of selling until you contact them. Mm-hmm. It could be cold called. It could be door knocking. Mm-hmm. It could be what else could it be? Maybe you met somebody mm-hmm. somewhere and you just happen to tell them what you do, and all of a sudden they're thinking about that. Let me just say, and I know sometimes when we describe these kind of leads, people are like, "Oh, that's like the least kind of lead I want to go after." Here's the best news about these raw leads. There's no shortage of them. Mm-mm. There is no shortage of them, and it is about as cheap of a lead as you're going to get.
Yeah, absolutely. And like when I'm like considering what's a raw lead, mm-hmm. so like if I'm pulling lists from like a list source, such as Deal Driven that like we have, to me a raw lead is more like an actual vacant property or possibly a pre-foreclosure, a tax delinquent lead that you have their phone number to. Yep. So when you're describing like what a raw lead is, we're talking about the actions that take place, like cold calling them, like sending them a piece of direct mail. That's what's considered a raw lead. But like you said, I mean, there's no shortage of them.
Literally.
So for anybody that's wanting to really take their business to the next level, meaning do more than one or two deals in a year, you've got to work these raw leads. I mean, out of all the deals we've done, I mean, how many do you think started from a raw lead?
I'd say a huge amount, an overwhelming amount, and I'll tell you something even more impactful than that, Julie. When I got started, 100%, like in the first probably 3 years, 4 years of this business, all of my leads, all my leads were raw leads, and all my deals came from them. Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, most people that get started in real estate start with raw leads. Mm-hmm. One, like I said, since they're free, perfect place to practice. If somebody comes in and says, well, I'm going to dump $1 million into marketing, and I'm just going to be like, you better have more than $1 million, because a lot of those leads before you practice, you're going to kind of just mess those up a little bit. And here's the other thing is I call them long tail leads, meaning a lot of them the relationship has to be worked. Because they don't know you, they don't trust you. Since you're trying to time it, you may have just mistimed it, right? They're like, well, I don't want to sell now, but I want to sell, 6 months from now. So A, if you don't have a lot of money, perfect place. Mm-hmm. B, if you're a beginner, perfect place. C, if you just don't have confidence, you might not even be a beginner. I mean, there's people we work with that, have done this for a while, but just their confidence level is not there. Well, I always say, if your confidence level is not there, why spend a bunch of money in marketing? Go get yourself a bunch of free stuff and just, if nothing else, build your confidence up.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the reasons, let's talk about like warm and hot leads, okay? So we got the raw leads, which everybody starts with, and actually raw leads turn into hot leads after you take some action. So I'm new, I'm calling, but eventually you're going to get somebody that says yes, right?
No question. It's a numbers game.
It absolutely is a numbers game. Like one reason why our Partner Driven Max program is so effective is because we hire and train what we call a phone pro. Okay. And a phone pro's job is to literally call through all of these, what we consider these beginning type of leads. Yep. So they're making the hundreds of calls to get through the information. So when you have a phone pro, or what people like to call a caller, I like calling it a phone pro because, there is skill involved there. How does your success rate go up? Like, explain to me why a phone pro or a caller is so important to somebody.
Well, I could tell you, if you ever want to scale this business, if you want to be beyond just a one-off, kind of get lucky, if you want to enjoy a lifestyle yourself beyond just trading time for money, that's a critical. It's a critical aspect. Because any way you look at it, even on warm leads, like you and I both know, even if you pay money for a warm lead, they're not all going to be good leads. I mean, I guarantee you that if we pay for 100 leads of people actually calling us, I mean, we would be ecstatic if we got 5 deals out of that.
Yeah.
We'd make a ton of money. It'd be worth paying for those 100 leads. But that's still 95 people who you have to have a conversation with who tell you no. So your ability to scale this business, especially in those initial stages, I think is 100% proportionate to your ability to bring someone on board.
Yeah.
Whether you call them a phone pro, whether you call it another marketing person, whether it's somebody to take the leads for you. But I mean, it is absolutely critical.
Kind of like to give an example. We did a webinar last night, right? We were talking to Glenn, one of our awesome partners, and the thing about Glenn is that the deal we closed 2 weeks ago, I don't remember the street name. It was somewhere in Tampa, Clearwater, that area. He started working with that lady 6 months ago. Okay.
Yep.
And he constantly followed up. He had made an offer back then. And at the time, she didn't want to sell at that price. Well, he consistently followed up with her to a point to where she's like, okay, you followed up with me. Now I understand maybe I'm a little bit unrealistic. Let's go. I'll take your price.
Right.
Right. So I'm telling you this because it's an example that the fortune is always in the follow-up. Because the more that you build people, let's say, and put them into this funnel, right, or their coffers, the more success that you're going to have. Sometimes deals don't come immediately. Yeah, you're going to get lucky every once in a while, and you might get a deal your first couple months or your first week, but it's amazing what happens when you start getting after 6 months, because they just build and build and build and build and build.
No
I mean, I know
question.
you've seen this scenario many times in your life.
Well, you know, you just used the word, and I know some people might not even understand what you're talking about. But, you know, you said you kind of have to get lucky up front, and you kind of do.
Yeah.
People sometimes think, well, Pete, it's because you're a better negotiator that you're able to get more deals. Not really. It's because I make more calls that I'm able to get more deals. You know, your ability to communicate once you get a seller on a phone, yes, it differentiates a little bit, but not huge. I do agree with you very much. In the beginning, it's kind of you kind of have to get lucky. I mean, let's face it. You don't usually. When was the last time you called somebody and they're like, "Oh, hey, I'm glad you called. Yes, I got a house worth $200,000, and I've been sitting here trying to figure out how to give it away for $50,000." Like we've been this thing for over a decade. Those calls don't happen.
No.
But what does happen almost inevitably is the example you were just using with one of our partners, Glenn. You call, you make contact. For whatever reason, it doesn't happen. Could be a timing thing, could be a price thing, it could be a lack of motivation thing, right? It could be pie in the sky. I mean, how many sellers have we talked to, who we ultimately end up doing deals with, where first they start here, right? Pie in the sky, then reality check, you know, sets in, and then we get it here. Well, the reason we get it here is because we start up here. Because we're willing to go and you know, go and make the calls and make the contacts. But the reason we get them here is because we're willing to do that follow-up. So absolutely incredibly important. But, you know, it really comes down to the basics. You know, sometimes people say, well, people overcomplicate this business. But I tell people this, and I've heard you say this, like if you were just to put me on a very simple trajectory, right? Let's say I started at 0, or let's say we have a new partner starting at 0. You know how many partners, they always ask, what's the plan? What's the secret? You know, what do I got to do to make this thing successful? And I know a lot of times the answer I give them, it almost sounds comically boring and comically basic. But I just tell them, look, 50 calls a day. 50 calls a day, connect with as many people as you can, or 100 calls if you have more time or whatever. But that's it. That's as complicated as this business gets. If you make a commitment to reach out to the raw lead, however you do it. I don't care if you talk to 50 homeowners because you're hitting a subdivision, you're knocking on doors. I don't care if you talk to 50 homeowners because you're making cold calls. I don't care if you talk to 50 homeowners, however you do it. But if you just reach out, obviously you're not going to talk to them all. That would be an incredible day. But if you reach out and connect with at least 50 people that own a piece of property in the market you live in, I would say it'd be pretty difficult that within the next number of months you're not going to have something hit out there. And that's the other thing. I think the reason most people misinterpret their leads is they haven't seen the effect of what happens when you follow a lead for, I don't know, what did you say, Glenn?
6 months, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you and I have followed leads for 5-6 months, and we know what happens.
And years, actually.
Sometimes years, so we know the magic that takes place. The problem with the new person, they listen to us, right? And they kind of comprehend what we're saying, but then they get on their own phone, they start making calls, they talk to 20 people who do have properties, don't want to sell right now. They haven't talked to them for those 3, 4, 5, 6 months, maybe longer, so they haven't seen what's possible. It's kind of like walking into Disneyland, right? Being led in the front door, but then there's a wall right behind there, and you don't see everything behind there. And they're like, oh, just trust me. Give us $200 for your ticket. Like,
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Another thing is you can always tell somebody's success by their follow-up. Okay? Like the amount of follow-ups they have. Like what's crazy is you might see people quit this business.
Right.
When they're right here on the precipice of all of their follow-ups starting to take place.
That's right.
And quit right before that answer. But, Pete, I love this discussion that we had today, raw leads versus motivated leads. The point is, leads have to be worked, right? They've got to be worked from beginning. They got to be worked from an end. 100%. So whether you're working on a raw lead, whether you're working on a hot lead, they all take work, right? You're never going to have the perfect scenario. So, you just got to get out there and do it. So on behalf of Peter and myself, thank you for joining us.